Hello, everybody. This is Kristen Galden with Hand to Mind. Thank you so much for coming. We are going to get started here in just a minute. Before we do, I want to go over just a couple of housekeeping things with the webinar. So first and foremost, you have come in on mute. So this is because of the number of attendees. So we just want to keep feedback down. There is a question feature on your control panel. That question feature allows you to send questions, comments, issues our way. If you are experiencing, technical difficulty or have a question, we will do an open Q&A at the end. So feel free to send those throughout and I will flag them and we will have Heather answer them at the end. And you can choose phone call instead of computer if the phone is easier. Like today I'm on the phone, it's just a better connection. So feel free to switch over if you need to do that. And if you do, it will show you the telephone number and the access code and audio pin that you would enter in order to connect fully to the phone. So while I am going to pass things off to Heather here in just a moment, I do want to also go over that you will receive a follow-up email. It is an automated email coming from K-2. It looks like it's coming from me. That email will contain two things. It will contain a link so that you can go watch the recording. So yes, that will come. It is not immediate. So I think it's set for a few hours after the webinar ends. So be patient, give it some time. It will come. If you don't see it, by tomorrow morning, check your spam. Sometimes the district emails filter it out. That same email will also contain a certificate. So that certificate is basically just, something you pull up in a PDF and it says that you attended a 1-hour webinar with Hand to Mind, and you can try to turn that in and get PD credit from your admin. So both of those will come in the same email. If you stay on through the end of the webinar, we will also be doing a giveaway of a reading strategies toolkit. So we hope, we encourage you to stay on so that you have a chance to win one. And I will be reaching out as a follow-up to do that. So I'm going to launch a poll quick before I pass things off to my colleague. So in your control panel, you should see something pop up in the poll. So I want to get a feel for what kind of an instructional model you're in. So it just gives you an option to choose either you are 100% in person, you are in a hybrid model, you are 100% e-learning, or other, which could be, homeschooling, or, I've seen some like learning pod kind of things. But I just want to get a feel for what your current instructional environment is. Thank you. So just so everybody knows, we are probably, let's see, I can share these, looking at about 53% of the audience today is 100% e-learning. Heather, 33% is in a hybrid model. And then I have one more. Can you just give us a better understanding of what your differentiation and remediation looks like right now? How often do you find yourself, and this doesn't have to be currently because we're teaching in sort of an insane environment, what did you do typically, prior to now? Did you differentiate or remediate 25% of the time, half the time? Just give us a feel for how often you are doing this in your instruction. Very good. Okay, I think the most popular option is about 25 to 50% of the time. So that's perfect. Thank you guys for doing that. Heather, I am going to go ahead and make you the presenter. Everybody, I will be here in the background. Heather, that goes for you as well. If anybody needs anything, she's going to take you through a lot of great content. So we're having some technical issues with the video, so you're not going to see her, but I promise the presentation will be the same. So Heather, you should have the prompt on your screen and you can take it away.
Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Heather Jenkins and I am a development editor at Hand to Mind. And I'm really excited to be speaking to you today about remediation and intervention. And we're going to be looking at some tips, tricks, and resources for grades kindergarten through second. Prior to becoming involved in curriculum development, I spent over 10 years in the public school system as a teacher, specialist and district administrator, and most of that time was spent in the field of special education. So remediation and intervention is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm very passionate about working with students so that they can succeed. So my hope for today's webinar is that when you leave, you'll be able to take at least one or two things that you can actively use in your classroom when you're providing remediation and intervention to your students. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's look at an overview for our webinar. We're going to begin by defining remediation and intervention, so we have some common language as we move through the presentation. Next, we're going to examine research and best practices related to remediation and intervention. Then, we're going to explore how hands-on learning and various manipulatives can be incorporated during remediation and intervention in both kindergarten through second grade math and literacy. While the examples that we'll explore are not all-encompassing, the goal is to provide you with some exemplars of how you might incorporate hands-on learning with manipulatives into remediation and intervention in your classroom. And then finally, we're going to explore the importance of engaging families in remediation and intervention efforts. Remediation and intervention are terms that are sometimes used interchangeably, and even though they represent two different things, many educators may even have slightly different definitions for both terms. Additionally, depending on the environment and the student population you're working with, your remediation intervention could look very different from the remediation and intervention in other classrooms or schools. So with keeping these things in mind, let's look at defining both remediation and intervention for the purposes of our presentation. In general, remediation is often referred to as reteaching or teaching the concept again. It usually occurs fairly soon after a new concept is introduced, and it's really aimed at clarifying misconceptions and understanding. Oftentimes, the need for remediation is identified through formative assessments that are conducted during or at the conclusion of a particular lesson. Also, remediation is ideally done early in the learning process before a skill is formally assessed or other subsequent skills are introduced. Now let's take a look at intervention. In general, intervention may often be viewed as something that is more formalized. It usually provides tiered supports and interventions, such as seen in the response to intervention or RTI model. Intervention usually targets specific skill deficits that are often identified through formal and standardized assessments and may not be linked to a recent lesson. Intervention seeks to prevent learning gaps from widening, and the goal is often to fill learning gaps so that the student can continue to make progress towards grade level standards. Intervention frequently uses research-based instructional approaches, and student progress is usually regularly tracked over time, often using a progress monitoring tool. For the purposes of our presentation, we are going to focus on the common features of both remediation and intervention. In both cases, first the student is initially provided with instruction. This instruction may have occurred recently, or it may have occurred some time ago. Next, the student is identified as needing support for a particular skill. So in response, the teacher provides appropriate instruction and support. This could occur during one or two sessions, as might be common during remediation, or it could occur over the course of several sessions that might be the case more with intervention. Finally, the student understanding or progress towards the mastery of the skill is assessed and measured. As we engage in remediation and intervention, it's important to consider what research tells us about the best practices for student mastery of math and literacy skills. When we look at the research and best practice surrounding both remediation and intervention, we find some general considerations for teachers. First, it's important to examine the student's needs. This could include a variety of things, We might look at the formative and summative assessments that we give. We might also look at performance on standardized tests, or we might also consider any observations or anecdotal notes that were made while working with the student during the course of the school day. A lot of times when I'm thinking about students' needs, I like to think about some of these questions, such as, can I pinpoint exactly what the student is struggling with in reference to a particular concept? Do they have the prior knowledge and the prerequisite skills that they need to be successful with the concept? Are they struggling with a particular step in a multi-step process? The more that I can pinpoint the exact area of need, the more focused that my remediation and intervention can become. Next, it's important to consider what setting the remediation or intervention will best be provided in. Depending on the student's needs and the structure of the classroom, this might best be provided in a small group setting or one-on-one. It's also beneficial to consider what the student positively responds to during instruction. Think about how the materials are presented to the student. How does that student show their knowledge? And what engages them in the instruction when they are successful? If you can replicate those conditions during remediation and intervention, then there could be a greater chance of success for the student. Finally, choosing appropriate instructional strategies and materials and determining how progress will be assessed and monitored is imperative to successful remediation and intervention. As you go through remediation and intervention with a student, it's important to constantly assess their understanding or monitor their progress, and then adjust your instruction if necessary based on that data. Now, sometimes deciding how to approach instruction during remediation and intervention can be easier said than done. After all, many times the student may have been presented with many different chances to master a concept, but they are still struggling. This can be frustrating for the teacher or for the student, and it can also be challenging for us as teachers. It helps to begin by looking at what we know about how students learn. Well, we know that learning is a multifaceted process. As the framework for universal design for learning points out, students learn best when they are provided with multiple means of representation of the content. Also, when they are allowed to express their knowledge in different ways, and when they can engage with instructional material in different ways. Students need opportunities to first access the information, then make meaning of it and build upon it, and then finally internalize it. So research also shows us that most students, particularly in math, often learn by moving from a concrete understanding of a concept to an abstract understanding. For example, in math, we know that an effective instructional practice is the concrete representational abstract model, or CRA. Students begin by learning a concept by modeling it using tangible objects. This might be, for example, using counters to model an addition problem. Then they transfer that knowledge to a representational format, such as drawing pictures of the counters to represent the problem. Finally, students move to an abstract understanding in which they use numbers, letters, and/or symbols to show the problem. In language, we also see the same sort of thing as a child learns to communicate. Children will often first point to objects to communicate. Then they might recognize pictures or photographs of the object. And then finally, they associate those pictures and objects with the written and spoken word. Over the years, research has shown that incorporating hands-on learning with manipulatives during instruction can help increase student motivation and engagement. It can also support meaning-making and allow students to develop a deeper understanding of concepts and can easily transfer them to new situations. Hands-on instruction with manipulatives is so effective that the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics has recommended its use in all grade levels. What I found is that many times a student may struggle to understand a concept because they've only been presented with an abstract version of that concept. They have not had the chance to build connections between what they can touch, see, and experience and the numbers, letters, words, and symbols on the page. As we work through our presentation, we'll be examining how to incorporate hands-on learning to help students move from this concrete understanding to abstract levels of understanding as they deepen their knowledge of math and literacy concepts. So before we go forward anywhere with this presentation, I would be remiss not to address the current climate that we find ourselves in. Today's educational climate presents many changes as school systems are trying to find a mix of environments to meet students' needs. I saw in our poll that a majority of our attendees are actually in a virtual learning environment. We also see school systems providing a mix of hybrid learning, 100% remote learning, and in person. You may be thinking to yourself, and rightfully so, how can I incorporate hands-on learning in our current reality of a hands-off, 6 feet apart world? Well, there is good news. With some strategic planning and preparation, hands-on learning and learning with manipulatives can still occur in all of these settings. If you find yourself teaching remotely, consider using a camera to model working with physical manipulatives. You could use a webcam, a document camera, or even a smartphone on a tripod to show students the manipulatives as you work with them. Even if students don't have their own manipulatives right there with them, it's still beneficial for them to watch you modeling the activity with the manipulatives. If possible, use virtual manipulatives that both you and the students can interact with, no matter where you are. Braining Camp offers a number of virtual manipulatives to use. Braining Camp is available on our website for trial and purchase as well. Additionally, to lessen the contact between students, or for students who may need manipulatives in multiple settings, like at school and at home, you might consider creating single student manipulative kits for the classroom and or at home. There are many printable manipulatives as well that you could easily print off for students to use in the classroom or to take home with them. If you're interested, we also offer single student and at-home manipulative kits, as well as free printable manipulatives on our website. So let's begin by looking at remediation and intervention in math. Within kindergarten through second grade math, there are different areas that are frequently addressed in remediation and intervention. These include counting and cardinality, adding and subtracting, place value, geometry, and measurement and data. Let's see how hands-on learning with manipulatives could help you provide remediation and intervention in these areas. First, we'll focus on ways to use manipulatives to model mathematical concepts and problems. Let's look at a scenario that younger students might commonly find in the math classroom. A game has 9 game pieces. Some are red and some are yellow. Usually students are given a scenario like this and then asked to show different combinations of game pieces that make up a total of 9 game pieces. This helps students practice composing or decomposing a number, a skill that is needed as they move into addition and subtraction. Students who struggle with a problem like this may have a difficulty with counting or with understanding that a quantity can be represented in different ways. Beginning at the concrete level of understanding, we first want to make sure that the student can show 9 pieces that are red and yellow. I might use the 3 bear family counters and have the student count out 9 bear counters of one color, let's say red. Then I would have them replace a few of them with yellow bears so that there's a mix of colors. If needed, I could even provide 9 landing spots, such as dots, for the students to place the bears on if they're still struggling with counting. Next, I would provide the student with 2 pieces of construction paper, a red piece and a yellow piece. Then the students could separate the bears onto the different pieces of construction paper. After that, they could count how many bears are red and how many bears are yellow. Once this level of understanding is mastered, you could then have the students draw a picture of the red and yellow bears, and then finally write the numerals to represent the red bears, the yellow bears, and the total number of bears. Modeling numbers and mathematical concepts in different ways can help students make different connections in their brain. Additionally, some students might respond better to using different types of manipulatives. So here's another way that I might represent the same problem. You could have students count out 9 two-color counters. Then you could provide the students with a 10 frame and have them place a certain number of red counters in the 10 frame. Then they could flip the remaining counters over to show the yellow game pieces. This could also be done within the 10 frame using color tiles or Unilink cubes if you didn't want to use the two-color counters. The 10 frame helps students to see their counters in an organized way, and it also begins to reinforce the place value concept of a 10. Students could then count the number of red counters and yellow counters to see the different combinations that make a total of 9 counters. Again, students could follow that by drawing a picture of the counters and writing the numbers to show the different combinations that they've made. Now, as students move into addition and subtraction, many students struggle with relating the addition and subtraction symbol to the concept of putting together or pulling apart. They are perhaps missing the understanding of addition and subtraction at the concrete level of understanding. So it's important that these students understand the action behind adding or subtracting numbers. For example, students might encounter a problem like this. There are 12 houses on Marco's block. Then 5 more were built. How many houses are on Marco's block now? To help students with a problem like this, I might use a part whole mat and counters to model the problem. The student would put 12 houses in one of the part circles and 5 houses in the other. Then they would combine the houses in the bottom circle and count them. The part whole mat helps students visualize the add-ins of the number sentence as parts to the 12 and 5, and the sum as the whole, the 17. By visually separating the two groups of houses and then combining them into one circle, students can experience the action of putting together or joining two quantities during addition. Now, the same problem could also be represented a different way using a rec and rec. The rec and rec allows students to simulate the movement of numbers being added to or taken away from a quantity as they slide beads back and forth across each row. Additionally, rec and recs can also build a student's capacity for subitizing, or the ability to tell the number of objects in a set quickly without counting. In this problem, students could easily show 12 by moving 10 beads on the top row and 2 on the bottom row. This also brings up a great teachable moment to help students associate the fact that 12 is made of a 10 and a 2. Then, students could slide 5 beads over on the bottom row to show the additional 5 houses being built. Students can not only make the connection that 12 plus 5 is 17, but that 17 is also made up of a 10 and 7 1s. They can do this by looking at the 2 rows of beads. Through students moving the beads on the rec and rec, they can again experience the action of adding that they can build upon as they move to more abstract understandings of the concept. So as students begin to continue to develop their understanding of place value and move into adding and subtracting larger numbers, base 10 blocks can present a concrete way to show regrouping. For many students, the concept of regrouping between different place values can be difficult. And oftentimes, it's because students may only see regrouping when we line up numbers one on top of the other and draw slashes through them to change their value. Students then struggle with the understanding that those are really groups of 10s and they're being exchanged or composed and decomposed. For example, as students progress, they might encounter a problem like this. There are 38 houses in Marco's neighborhood. Then 23 more were built. How many houses are in Marco's neighborhood now? By using base 10 blocks, students can easily exchange 10 units for a rod to show 110, or if they were using larger numbers, 10 rods for one flat to show 100. In this problem, students can combine the rods and the units and then exchange groups of 10 units for rods, with the leftover units representing the ones. These exchanges help provide a foundation for students to understand the abstract representation of regrouping. Now, in addition to using varying manipulatives to help students model a problem, it's important to think about how you can strategically select manipulatives and other materials to help guide students from the concrete to the abstract. Research conducted in the role of math manipulatives in math instruction has found that students who can solve problems at the concrete level may still struggle to solve the same problem at the abstract level. So this is where careful consideration of the manipulatives that we choose is important, and it can also help bridge the gap between the different levels of understanding. So for example, you might be used to using counters to help students represent a number. To bridge the gap between this concrete understanding and the representational stage of understanding, you might pair these counters with multiple representation dice. These dice show different ways that you can represent numbers. You might have students roll the dice to show tiles, a 10 frame, or tally marks for a number. Then students could build the number using counters to see the connection between the representation of that number and the concrete object. As students move more towards the abstract stage and are starting to recognize numerals, they could build a number using counters and then find the die with the picture and the numeral to match it. In geometry, students may struggle with identifying attributes of shapes, such as vertices and sides, and also how those attributes can help identify particular shapes. They can also struggle with visualizing how larger shapes can be composed of smaller shapes. At the concrete level, students can use pattern blocks to physically identify parts of shapes by touching and counting the vertices and sides of a shape. They can also physically manipulate those blocks and combine them to create larger shapes. After students have had this opportunity to manipulate the physical shapes, a nice bridge to drawing shapes and to having more abstract discussions and operations with shapes is to use a geoboard. Students can position and easily reposition the rubber bands on the board. This allows them the flexibility in exploring the attributes and constructions of shapes without having to draw and erase. For example, students might make a triangle using the rubber bands on the board. Then they can reposition the rubber band to create a square. By simply moving that rubber band, students can explore how that movement affected the attributes of the shape. Now, in the area of measurement and data, many kindergarten through second grade students struggle to understand time. One reason is because the numbers on the clock are actually abstract representation of time intervals. They can also show both the hour and the minute. At the concrete level, students may benefit from using something like the number line clock. This clock allows students to deconstruct the clock face into hour and minute number lines. Students can practice identifying hours and minutes using a linear structure they may be more familiar with. Now, once they've mastered this, to help make the connection to abstract representations of time, you could pair this with multiple representation time dice. These dice show different ways to represent time, including numbers and words. Students could roll one of the die and then represent the time on the deconstructed hour and minute number lines of the clock. They could use the hour hand to point to the hour and the minute hand to point to the minute. Additionally, within the realm of measurement and data, many students struggle with the ability to organize data into tables and graphs. In the early elementary grades, students are just beginning to build an understanding of how to classify and group data. To help develop this understanding, students could use manipulatives like unilink cubes to help them represent data. One of the most favorite activities that students do in regards to data is finding out the favorite colors of students in the classroom. As students find out the favorite color of each student in the classroom, they could use a different color Unilay cube to represent that piece of data. Then they could stack the cubes of the same color together to make towers. And these towers simulate the bars of a bar graph. Then students might use something like our Build-A-Grid to create a bar graph. Using the Build-A-Grid, students can change the transparencies and overlay cards to create the right configuration for their bar graph. Then the students could count each individual cube in each tower and color the corresponding boxes on the Build-A-Grid. Guiding students from the concrete to the abstract not only relies on the careful selection of materials, but also in the mathematical conversations and language used during remediation and intervention. Research tells us that it's important for students to be able to talk about the mathematical processes that they're engaged in. This then allows students to increase their flexibility, their efficiency, and their accuracy when working with numbers. Our math fluency intervention kits can help build numeracy skills in students who are struggling with core number concepts. These kits are designed to be used in just 10 minutes a day. The kits provide both number strings and number talks to help engage students in conversations about mathematical concepts. They also help students to explore different strategies and provide a framework to move students from concrete to abstract understanding of math concepts. Each kit includes activities to address one of 5 core concepts, and these include basic addition and subtraction facts, multiple digit addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, and fractions and decimals. Each kit also includes a progress monitoring tool to help you track your students' progress over time. On the screen, you'll see an example of a number string that helps students work through the strategy of getting or making 10. You'll notice that in this particular example, they're using a 10 frame, and you'll see that there are specific guiding questions that teachers can use to help students have a discussion about what they're doing. Here's an example of a number talk that focuses on strategies using manipulatives and representations. This provides students with multiple ways to approach a particular problem. You'll notice that this particular math talk uses a rec and rec, a 10 frame, and it also has pictorial representations and numbers. These are all used to help teachers discuss the concept. Additionally, you'll also notice that there are some questions that teachers can use to help guide a further discussion of this concept. So now that we've thoroughly examined some of the different ways that we can use hands-on learning in remediation and intervention in math, we're going to switch gears and focus on remediation and intervention in literacy. Before we begin, let's acknowledge the fact that reading is definitely an abstract process. First, we have the letters on the page, and those letters represent certain sounds. And then when those letters are combined, they make words. And then we assign meaning to each individual word. And if that wasn't confusing enough, then we also assign meaning to combinations of words in the forms of sentences and paragraphs. While all this is going on, many parts of our brain are involved when we read that include looking at word recognition, decoding, and language comprehension. Since reading is such a complicated process, it is no wonder that we have many students that are struggling with different aspects of reading. Frequently, remediation and intervention in literacy addresses the areas of phonemic awareness and phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. Additionally, unlike math, literacy is sometimes not viewed as a subject that can be easily made to be hands-on. However, some studies have been conducted on the use of physical manipulatives while students are engaged in reading comprehension activities. And these studies have shown that students perform better with the manipulatives than they do without them. So keeping all this in mind, let's examine some ways to integrate hands-on learning into literacy, remediation, and intervention. To help break down the abstract and complex processes of reading, we can provide opportunities for reading to become a multi-sensory experience for students. For example, as students are exploring blending and segmenting initial, medial, and final sounds, they could easily use reading rods to build the words using individual letter cubes. Then once they've built the word, they could place a magnetic chip under each letter. As they say and blend the sounds in the word, the student can use a magnetic wand to move it over the chip and pick them up as each sound is said. This provides a physical and visual connection between saying a sound and the letter in the word that makes that sound. Visual and auditory supports can also make reading a multisensory experience. Visual supports like highlighting tape, colored overlay strips, or the finger focus highlighter that you see on your screen can help students improve tracking and attention to the words as they read. For some students, highlighting a word in a certain color can help them focus better on the word and the letters within it. To use the finger focus highlighter, a student can choose the color of the highlighter that they would like to attach to the ring. Then the student moves the highlighter across the page as they read. The visual support of the colored highlighter moving across the page also helps to reinforce the directionality of reading from left to right. And this is a concept that many early readers struggle with. You could also use the finger focus highlighter to support a multi-sensory approach to annotating text during close reading. As students engage in successive readings of a text, students can use the finger focus highlighter to find and highlight important words and ideas. Additionally, we know the importance of students being read to and the benefits of students reading aloud. Many students who struggle with reading and later fluency benefit from multiple opportunities to read aloud, including repeated reading. By reading the same piece of text during multiple readings, students can gain confidence in their reading, and they can also focus on self-correction and how to develop an appropriate reading pace. Students might make a recording of themselves reading a text, they might read to a partner, or they could use a phoning phone. Students read into the phoning phone, so the sound of their voice is directed directly into their ear. Then this provides auditory feedback and helps them to hear themselves reading, which provides a better opportunity for them to self-correct and adjust their pace as needed. Manipulatives can also play important roles in helping students to understand relationships found within literacy concepts. Through the use of colors, shapes, and other attributes, we can show how word parts, words, and ideas are connected. For example, when studying word parts, you might use link and learn links to demonstrate a prefix and a root word. Separately, each link is a different color, representing the prefix and the root word. When the links are put together, they model how a prefix and a root word are put together to make a new word. Students could easily model this by saying the prefix and root word separately and then putting the links together while saying the new word. So in this example, a student might hold the red link and say the prefix pre, and then hold the yellow link and say the root word heat. Then they could connect the links together and say the word preheat. The color coding of the links reinforces that the word is made of different parts, and the act of linking the links together reinforces that the joining of the word parts makes a new word. If you're examining something like opposites or antonyms, you might also use two colors of color tiles to show that the words have opposite meanings. Students might touch one color tile and say big, and then touch another color of tile and say the opposite, small. The different colored tiles reinforce that the words have different meanings. Then if you wanted to extend this concept and students are beginning to examine synonyms, they might touch a blue color tile and say a synonym for big, or a red color tile to say a synonym for small. Touching a tile of the same color reinforces that the words have the same or about the same meaning. Manipulatives can also be used to support comprehension. They can be used to model relationships between ideas, such as cause and effect. Students can model the interconnectivity between events or pieces of information in a text that have a cause and effect relationship. They could do this using Unilink cubes. A student might choose different colored cubes to represent the cause and the effect. Then they can say the cause and effect separately as they hold each cube. Then they can put the cubes together to signify the connection between the two. The joining together of the different colored cubes shows that they are related and that the effect depends on the cause. This could also be modeled in the same way using links or also dominoes. Now, manipulatives can also be used to provide organizational structures and frameworks for students to visualize information they gathered while reading. They can also be used in the same way to help students communicate and talk about what they've read. Oftentimes, students may struggle with expressing their knowledge of the events or ideas after they've finished reading. To lessen the cognitive load for students, manipulatives can be provided to assist students in organizing their thoughts. For example, many students struggle with putting events in order while retelling a story. By having a chain of link and learn links, students can have a tangible way to organize their thoughts as they touch each link and describe the beginning, middle, and end of the story. They could also touch the links in a chain to describe the main topic and details in a piece of informational text. Having the links linked together reinforces that the events or the information are connected either by sequence or in sharing the same topic. Likewise, students might also create a story pattern and touch different pattern blocks to identify the story elements in a story. Different shapes are used to represent different elements. In this case, we've used a hexagon to represent characters, a trapezoid to represent the setting, and triangles to represent the event. You can also use similar shapes, such as the triangles, to represent items that are related. So these triangles show that these are all events, but as the student touches each one, they want to focus on the beginning, middle, and ending events in the story. Now, to assist teachers in providing hands-on literacy support for students, we have our Reading Strategies Toolkit. This kit provides 12 sample lessons covering 6 reading strategies, such as find and follow, blend sounds and syllables, segment and swap, smooth and speed, define and contextualize, and read to understand. The kit also includes literacy manipulatives, including our phoneme foam, finger focus highlighter, and comprehension cubes. This toolkit could be easily used to support remediation and intervention for students in grades kindergarten through 2nd. Now that we've looked at how we can use hands-on learning in remediation and intervention for both math and literacy, it's important that we take a look at how we can engage families in this process as well. Research shows that when families are actively involved in the remediation and intervention process, students are more engaged and ready to learn at school. Additionally, we know that intervention is likely to be more successful when parents or guardians are actively involved. The simple fact is that many parents really want to be involved in their child's learning, but they may feel that they lack the resources or the knowledge to do so. So how can we engage families in remediation and intervention? Well, let's look at a couple of things that we can do. When engaging families, it's important to view the homeschool relationship as a partnership. To foster this partnership, it's important to provide frequent communication about student progress. Share the student's successes and communicate challenges as you encounter them, so families are aware of how to support the student at home. Additionally, it's important to consider any barriers to communication and involvement and to explore ways to remediate them up front. This might look like providing materials in the family's native language, or if a family doesn't have internet access, that maybe you find alternative ways to communicate, such as through phone calls or writing or scheduling regularly scheduled meetings. Finally, it's important to identify concrete and manageable ways that families can be involved with their students' remediation or intervention at home. Think about it. Is there a 5 or 10-minute activity a parent can do with their child to support your efforts in the classroom? What could you send home that would be easy for a parent to use with their child to help reinforce what they're learning throughout the school day? To help engage families, we recently created Learning at Home kits for students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade. These are our hands-on standards Learning at Home math kit, our Learning at Home literacy kit, and our Learning at Home cross-curricular kit. Each math and literacy kit comes with 6 weeks of hands-on, standards-aligned activities, 6 games, a parent calendar, and all the manipulatives needed to complete the activities and games. The cross-curricular kit also features both the math and literacy kits for a total of 108 hands-on math and literacy activities and 12 games. Additionally, all of our kits provide Spanish translations for key materials. You know, providing remediation and intervention can seem like a daunting task. By including the use of hands-on learning through manipulatives, we can help students make connections in meaningful ways that move them towards a deeper understanding of math and literacy concepts. Hopefully, I've given you some ideas to take back to your classroom. Now, before we take any questions, I would like to thank all of you for your time today, as well as your passion and desire to support your students, especially now during the unprecedented challenges that we're all facing. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris to begin our question and answer session.
Thank you, Heather. So actually, it's Kristen. I was able to stay on, so surprise. I am actually, I know, hello. I'm going to take control because there was a question about braining camp, so I'm going to show them that. But while I'm doing that, could you just explain a little bit about how the manipulatives, you know, help students synthesize the information and move them to the abstract in comparison to if a teacher was moving them through, you know, using maybe just pictures and not the actual tool? Like what's the difference in terms of the impact on the student and how and their understanding of the information?
Right. So when we look at pictures, and that's definitely, like we've seen, an important part of the cognitive process is being able to understand the representational piece before we move to the abstract. So without discounting the important place that pictures and representations have, there's also something a little bit different when a student is actually able to touch and feel that manipulative and actually to engage in things such as moving that manipulative. One of the best examples that we talked about was when we're talking about, let's say, addition and subtraction. So actually being able to take those physical items and put them together or to remove a certain section, that really helps the student to understand that abstract concept of adding and subtracting. The use of pictures, again, we're dealing with something that's static. So the student may still have difficulty in making that connection between, okay, if I'm drawing more of something or I'm putting a line through something or Xing it out, that might not resonate with the student as well as actually being physically involved in the manipulation and movement of those manipulatives.
Perfect. Thank you. So that was great, Heather. Thank you for walking us through all of that. The other question was related to braining camp. So I'm going to show my screen. Braining camp comes up a lot. So this is, for those of you that have attended our previous webinars, braining camp is our virtual manipulative. It is unique in the sense that it actually is an exact replica of the physical manipulatives, and you don't find that very often. So, you know, most of the e-tools out there aren't actually digital versions of the, you know, physical manipulatives. So with Braining Camp, you get access to all of these all of these manipulatives here. So base 10 blocks, 100 board, fraction circles, fraction tie, I mean, you name it, rec and rec. So the question was, how am I going to use Braining Camp with a student to share or kind of go back and forth because they released a new feature, a share feature. So I'm going to give you an example. And this could work in either setting. So if I am in person, this can work. If I am hybrid, this can work. If I am e-learning, this can work, because it's just a difference of how I'm sharing the link, right? So let's say I'm on a Zoom call and I show them Braining Camp. I show the students Braining Camp and I say, here is my, my representation of snap cubes, 5 plus 8. I want you to make this, turn this into 10 plus something and tell me what the answer is. Well, when you set up Braining Camp, you set up student accounts. And actually what I did is set up one. I set up one student account that's a general, username that any student could use. And so they could all log in. You could also do separate accounts, whatever is, if that's easier. So I just flipped over to a different browser. So let me go back so I can show you what I did. So on my screen, I would click on the left hand, I'd click share. And I would choose link or code. And I would copy this link and I'd put it in the chat box. And I would ask the students to click on that link. When they click on that link, I am now in my other browser, just to show you, and I'm in the student account. So now they could proceed to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they could proceed to break these up, right? They could come up, maybe they decide to do their own altogether. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We break these suckers up, we add another color, however they want to do it. And then they can show how that works, right? So when they finish with theirs, and let me do the whole thing so that you can see it here. We move this guy out. Oh, I'm going to move both of them. So I'm still learning with Braining Camp, but there we go. No, that didn't work. Okay, let's try this. Let me get rid of this guy. X. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8. So I need to get 2 more purple, and then I need to find the 1, 2. Did I get another one? Nope. Okay, let's try this again. So if I highlight that way, I can move the whole thing, which is much easier. So let's see. Am I adding a new one over? Oh, I have to drag it. I was just clicking it. That certainly helps, doesn't it? Okay. So then I highlight these, I move them up here, and then I come up with what my 10 is, 10 plus whatever, and it ends up being 10 plus 3, right? So they need to show you visually that they get that this 5 plus 8 is also 10 plus 3. And so this is a great way for them to do that. And then I would expect them to get the pen or the text and to fill that in and tell me what the answer is, right? So when they do that, all they have to do is one of these things. They either have to copy the image and show you, or maybe they do the link as well, and you pull that up on your end on the Zoom call, and then, that's all you have to do. So now if I paste this here, I'm going to be brought to what that student just had in their Braining Camp. So the share feature is great because, again, it's not dependent on where they are, and it gives you a means of communicating back and forth and some accountability with the work. So I literally just took a problem from our free teacher resources, or Teach at Home, Hand to Mind at Home. I modeled it with Braining Camp, and I logged in as a student. So hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how you would use the share feature. If you go to handtomind.com, let me go ahead and pull this up for you. You can, if you haven't created a demo account for Braining Camp, if you go to handtomind.com/Braining Camp and you click free trial, you can sign up for a 60-day free trial that includes with student accounts. You can set up student accounts and give this a run. We have individual licenses, we have classroom licenses. So this is definitely something I encourage because, sometimes it's hard to get the, physical manipulatives in their hands, depending on what resources you have. So this is a great alternative. It at least allows them to visualize it and, interact with each other in a different way. So it keeps that engagement up in an e-learning or a remote setting. And then the other thing is, let me see, Patricia is the winner of the Reading Strategies Toolkit. So I will email her. I don't know how to say her last name, so I'm not going to attempt to, but I will shoot you an email and follow up. And again, everybody will get the recording and the certificate. So that comes automatically. It will come a few hours after this webinar. And if you have any questions, you can just reply to that email or reach out to me. My email is included there. So thank you guys for coming. Heather, thank you. I appreciate the great presentation, and we hope to see you again in the future on the webinars, guys. Have a good one.